Yeah. Could we take a couple minutes just to introduce each other?
Oh, that's true.
And how about you're in the center, so you're like the center of this, right?
I think the breakdown's different for everybody, but I'm not sure.
Mine's an inverted triangle, actually. So
that's true.
So, Stuart.
Oh, yes, I'm Stuart Deloney. I'm the host of the Snarky Faith podcast, friends with Carl and JD, Deconstructed, and we're looking to talk about new and better ways to be able to exist as dudes outside of toxic religious and other circles.
There's a possibility we might be Sigma males.
Could be.
I'm not sure about that yet.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm coming here from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Carl, where are you coming from?
We're in Northwest Missouri, in a town called Rockport. It's a town of 1,500. Small town. It's going to get really cold pretty soon. Oof. But I'm a former pastor of 20 years, also a computer programmer and some other things. The father of JD. And two lovely daughters, Abigail and Lily. I looked at Laura. See, I go Winston, to when I forget
the
things.
Wonder Dog.
Winston the Wonder Dog is at my feet, as he always is.
I'm hoping Winston will keep more quiet then. That's what I'm worried about. I've got a bunch of college kids in the house that will probably not wake up for another couple hours. So hopefully they won't be very noisy.
Yeah.
We'll see if my dogs stay quiet. One of them may run into the house in a minute and come and try to attack me. So we'll see. My dogs are wild.
I remember having JD and his friends into our house when we had 3 levels. It was a rented house, and it wasn't any imagination you're having of it being a luxury house. It's not. It wasn't anything like that. But they would be having knockdown dragouts upstairs. We could hear the thumping upstairs, and
I still remember one time Ryan and I were wrestling up there, and I fireman carried him over my head and slammed him on the ground, and I just heard you running up the stairs, and I was like, oh, I'm dead. Because I thought he was going to go through the floor once I dropped him. Because he's about like 215. He's a big, muscular dude.
Yeah.
I was just like, I made a terrible mistake. But you were just like, calm down, boys. It was okay.
People don't believe me growing up when I say it was like a Wild West movie. Sometimes we didn't just fight. We were punching each other out. So didn't experience as much of that with JD. They were relatively calm most of the time until they got up in the upper room, so to speak.
That's very. So I like that you had a 3-story house on your pastor box. You had the upper room designated as well too. That feels very pastorly, Carl.
Yeah, a lot of religious sounding things there, right? Probably where my deconstruction started.
Yeah. What about you, Jordan? Besides being the progeny of Carl's loins,
I'm a.
What about you?
I don't like that you put it like that. But I'm Jordan or JD or
dirty.
Yeah. Well, we're adding information that I don't need. But I'm. Hey, scramble my brains with that. I'm here from Taiwan, or I'm in Taiwan right now, Kaohsiung, Taiwan, city of about 2 million people. So the exact opposite of Dad. I'm a social sciences teacher at a junior high and high school. I also do photography on the side. Yeah, I'm like, I remember I think I was our superintendent used to always say at my school, the worst kids are pastors' kids and teachers' kids, and I'm both. So I can't believe I didn't turn out to be worse than I am. But I do my best.
It could be worse. You are Carl's love child.
Indeed.
It's true.
Yeah.
All right, we need to get off this subject soon. So, but yeah,
Carl, do you remember the night when JD was conceived?
Oh, Jesus! All right,
with her roses.
I was gonna say is the Christians are probably gonna think I am like a demon child though, because like I got out back here, I got all my Taoist stuff. I have This is a sword, basically, and then a bunch of temple festival hats. So, and then I have my open wall.
Your holy wall plug.
Yeah, that's right. It's in a great position.
Is that a Taoist plug in the back?
It is a Taoist plug. That's true. Okay. It's been blessed by 2D Kong. So the Earth God has blessed my...
No plug in your religions.
Yeah. Oh, I like. It's a symbol. It's a symbol too. It's right now. He's unplugged.
Yeah, that's right.
And
I'm free. I'm open to anything right now.
Oh, wow.
All right, let's get into that topic now. What are we connecting here? You're talking
Carl,
about
you brought
Lambert?
out, I think, in our planning, you had one of your former buddies.
Yeah,
you want to talk about?
Evangelical of the month is Tony Lambert. Tony used to be my kind of hero, right? He was about 10 years older than me, and when I went into ministry around 30 something, he was a little bit ahead of me. He pastored a mega church in Omaha, Nebraska, the biggest church there, West Side Church. And this clip is from West Side Church when he went back for something, And he's now in Alabama somewhere. Picayune, I can't even pronounce it. It's an Alabama word. And so he's pastoring down there now. And I would say this to kind of soften it a little bit, is that, he's been a friend of mine. He's really not now, because I'm not Southern Baptist anymore, and we're still pseudo friends and so on. So I don't have any hatred towards him, but when I saw this clip, it just reminded me of the toxicity that's kind of basic to a lot of fundamentalist religions. And it is that idea of sovereignty. So I'm going to try to play it and see if you guys can hear.
Knowing that God has at least permitted the test. If he is truly a sovereign God, if he is over everything, we can know that there is nothing that touches our life that has not at least gone through the blood of Jesus, the power of the Holy Spirit, the person of a sovereign God. And if God allows it in your life, he has a reason for it. I don't like that. How many times have I said I don't like that? I mean, God handed me this curriculum called the Bible, and about half of it I'm going, no, I don't think so. But I know it to be true, and I know that God is preparing me. Let me just say this one more time. I think maybe I've shared this illustration with you in the past. God has better seats than...
Okay. So, Carl, as we'll put this in later in post, that's an amazing clip. Carl, unpack it for us. So yeah, Carl, what about that? What grabbed you when you were first listening to that made you want to talk about this?
So I should say that Tony used to be my favorite preacher. Maybe him or Adrian Rogers or somebody like that, but they kind of play off the same playbook. And it's just that, in that religion, I didn't think about the sovereignty of God. I just accepted it, that God was in control and God does everything. But what comes to my mind almost immediately in talking with survivors of abuse and so on is that they often refer to things like this. So let me get this straight. My father raped me. God was standing by, and not only him, but the Father, Son, and the Spirit all approved or allowed this to happen. And I don't know a dad or a decent human being anywhere that would stand by and say, okay, rape, go ahead and rape my daughter. Or in the case of the bikers against trafficking, that lady said, her father trafficked her for years and years and years. And her question was, well, why is God allowing that? And but to keep that narrative going, you have to say God is in control. God had to allow it because he's in control of everything. And so,
he's got a higher seat than you do. He can see farther ahead.
Yeah, he's got better seats, right? There's a lot of rhythm to that, and that's the way he always preaches. There's cadence and he's changing his voice, but all of it's a bankrupt idea, in my opinion.
I feel like it's one of those easy answers to hard things that pastors like to toss in when they don't really have an answer for it. It's kind of that mystery box. Well, God's will. God knows better than we do.
Yeah.
God's ways aren't our ways.
Yeah, and that's the punt at the end, but the the go to the mat, go to the ring, go to the hoop or whatever, is just that you need to submit. You need to quit questioning all of this stuff. Bad things happen in the world, and you can't stop it.
It also makes it easier for the pastor, because then you can't question them either, which gets to things that we'll probably talk about later, about things like cult leaders and so on. But it's also I think when Stuart said that, I think that's a really good point, is that because in that he kind of talks about how it's hard for me, it's not easy, but his solution at the end is an easy solution. I used to do a podcast, a politics podcast with another guy, and we used to always say there's no simple solutions. Like you can any politician that gives you a simple solution is a BS artist, just to put it frankly. And I think it's the same thing with cult leaders or church leaders or whatever, religious leaders in general. Is if they're giving you some sort of easy solution, buy my book and it'll fix all your problems. Take my diet pills, it'll follow. No, they're full of it. That's unfortunately the reality, I think.
And what gets me is it's usually a lot of these things are spoken to people that are in vulnerable situations too.
Yeah.
Where they're wanting some sort of an answer because they're seeking something, they're trying to make sense of it. And I think that what I always like to do is sometimes in those nugget moments when like the pastors will throw those things at you, you kind of don't question it. But then if you start to tease it out, like what is God's nature if we really tease this out? God is just then some sort of profound narcissistic like asshole that it's kind of like, little Susie, I did assume that you being trafficked would teach you some valuable lessons. Yeah. And those lessons weren't going to be achieved any other way because I'm God. And I'm going to, this isn't a beautiful mosaic of things coming together. No, it's sick shit happens and that's life. And I sometimes wish pastors would be that honest, but then I guess that would lead them to the place of them saying, I don't know.
Yeah,
and it takes the control out of their hands.
Yeah.
He's not being honest because he's saying, I have this excellent guidebook, which half of it I don't agree with, but I still agree with because I have to, or I should, or
because
it doesn't even make any logical sense.
No, that's mental gymnastics there too.
Effective.
There's a lot of working backwards from your conclusions too. As well, I've seen it affirmed in my life, or these anecdotal. Well, I saw this happen in someone's life, and it's like that's great, but that's not how like actual evidence works. If you pulled that out in a 6th grade debate class, kids would kick the shit out of you, rhetorically, of course, but you'd be proven wrong so quickly because it's nonsense.
Did that happen in the upper room? Earlier when we were talking about that, were you?
We were mostly physical violence, but there was some rhetorical violence as well.
That's good. That's good. I think Carl raised you right.
Nothing spiritual or religious there, I don't think, was going on that I could tell.
It definitely wasn't. It was.
But
there
Carl,
was
remember,
there was a
God
spiritual
was
nature
this.
to it.
Yeah, God was knitting this together. That loud noise. It was a way for JD to know that his father loved him when would come running upstairs if there was a loud noise. See, God's sovereignty, amen,
surpasses everything.
In some of the comments when I posted that, some of the comments talked about, well, is it just the level of what happened? I said, not really, but they compared it to a skinned knee or something, and there are certainly things to life that you go through that help you grow.
It's again that very basic thing though. It's like you can learn from experience. Well, no shit. You can learn from experiencing things. That's fucking incredible. But it's like that. But it doesn't mean that everything happens for a purpose. That's the logical capacity of a toddler. Like that's not how it works. Okay, like Stuart said, there's really shitty and that's the other thing is that it's such a privileged argument to argue from. Is like. I live in this Western capitalist society where the worst thing that might happen to me is maybe like something like a rape. You don't live in like Sudan or something, or the Sahel region of Africa, where you're pretty likely to end up getting raped or killed or murdered, or maybe all of the above, turned into a child soldier. Like, what's God's plan in that? So you can turn into a child soldier at 12 and die by the age of 18? Wow, fucking beautiful plan.
Yeah, and I don't, I don't have any ill feelings against Tony, because he used to be my friend, but
I'll say he was
I feel
always nice
sorry
to me.
for him because he's trapped in the system, and everybody has to make choices, whether they're going to get out of that or stay in it. But somebody told him that when he was 21, when he used to, he says he used to, drink a lot and carouse around with girls and things like that, kind of normal that age things. But then God saved him from it. And some preacher told him that. Just like Tony used to say with the Bible, I have nothing to say of value that's not in this book. And so then I would say that when I go up to the stage. And Tony's still trapped in that loop where he's defending the sovereignty of God, even though it doesn't make sense to himself. He admitted that. Yeah. It doesn't even make sense to him, but I got to keep saying it because I've always said it, and because someone before me always said it. It's a trap, especially for narcissistic tending pastors,
And to that point, it's a very much it's a cult-like thing because you've dedicated so much of your life, so many of your resources to that thing, and you internalize it. And I'm so much an expert on psychology because I teach psychology. He said jokingly, but you do internalize it, and it becomes part of your identity. And then if you were to admit that that's wrong, then you're admitting that you yourself are wrong. It's not an easy thing to do. Even for me, when I was deconstructing or whatever you want to call it, it was not easy. It was very difficult. And I was never, I don't know. I always kind of like took a lot of parts of the church as a joking manner. I still remember one time I was in a bio Sunday school, and I had to have been in, when did we move to Big Lake? I had to have been like 7th or 8th grade. And I remember I was told if you said gosh or golly or gosh darn it, that was the same thing because God knows your heart. And I remember thinking, what a preposterous notion that I'm purposely trying to do something to not anger God, but he's still going to be angry at me because even though I'm purposely using a different word. And anyway, so I remember my Sunday school teacher said, if you have done that, you need to repent. And so I kicked the chair out from behind me and I fell down my knees. I said, please, dear God, I'm such a deep sinner. And I just remember her being shocked. Like, what is this new pastor's kid that came into my school? Because I just thought it was ridiculous. Like, I think I believed like in the ideas of Jesus and things like that. But it was just, even as a child, I was like, this is so farcical. Like, I don't know. Maybe I was lucky because I kind of felt that early on, and then I didn't get as involved in it to the point of like, I got to do all the, I don't know. I just viewed it as like kind of a personal relationship between me and Jesus.
But that's what you're describing as like anxiety fuel too. Like for people that like take that in, like as a kid, the idea that like, oh, if you say this, you're sinning. But if you think this, you're also sinning. Like God's patrolling you all the time, and there's no place where God isn't there judging you.
Yeah.
And that is, I feel like that's trauma fuel.
While he's there judging you, he's letting things happen to you.
Yeah.
He's judging me for saying gosh, but he's letting people rape people. That's
or
good God.
Or just letting you have a stream of toxic belief systems, letting you see things, letting you see the JD. JD started going with me to preach in places when he was 5. He would go along with me and watch me preach. And then when we were in church, from as early as he could do it, I think he was my sound man after that for a long time. So he saw how the sausage was made. And when we started in deconstruction, I think that was, one of my bigger fears, not what people will think of me, because I've always tended to kind of at some point just say that's enough and we're going to move on. We're going to do something different. but we worried about our children.
Mm-hmm.
And then I knew that JD and his sisters had talked a lot about religion and theology, philosophy, and so on. But I didn't know where they were exactly. And I went to talk to my daughters out on the porch and said, listen, our beliefs are changing. And they were kind of like, well, welcome. We're glad you're here. Come on in. And they were love bombing me into their church, kind of. But it was, I'm grateful that somehow, and, you know, a narcissist kind of person trying to defend what Tony's defending would say, well, see, all things work for good. God writes the perfect endings to the story, according to our long-haired friend in California, Stuart. You know, I'm talking about the worship leader. God writes the best stories.
The one with curly hair,
John.
Yeah.
Voight. Yeah. So
Fuched. The ramen shaman sucks. I hate that guy.
Yeah, I don't have any love for him at all.
I hate it. I hate him with the love of God. I don't, or how,
but
my righteous hate.
They would say, JD, you know, the sovereignty of God in your life. You know, even through all that, you turned out to be a good guy. You know,
it proves that you're on this podcast.
I was going to say most
plan.
people, hashtag God's plan. But I think a lot of people would say that I'm bad. Like I'm bad. I have like false gods or testaments to false gods hanging up in my room and in my closet. But yeah, I do think it's funny. And there's one reason that I'm glad that I was raised Southern Baptist. And I tell people this all the time is that once saved, always saved, motherfucker. Can't take that away from me.
Amen.
I'm saved.
That preaches.
You can't pull it away from me. And it's the only dogma that I still hold on to from the Southern Baptists.
I remember, I remember my dad telling me the story. My dad also, we all have some Southern Baptist connections here. My dad was always like chairman of deacons and had heavily involved in everything the church we're in. And it was someone I knew like pretty young growing up, and we still knew, like my parents still kept up with their family, and the father in the family died, and he was the one in the family that didn't go to church. And so everyone was like, they were like, oh no, it was solemn, it was sad. And then my dad told me, he was like, well, we went and found his Bible, and it still had the commitment card from when he was like 6 years old. So everyone was like, "Oh yes, now
Hallelujah.
We're happy he's dead." No, not. But it was just such a weird thing.
We're not as upset, at least.
I know, but even as a kid, I was just kind of going like, "This is so bizarre. This is so weird. This doesn't track at all. Like this is just an odd way of being able to look at this idea of sovereignty or like sneaking one in the goal to get into heaven."
Yeah.
Because I don't know. I just. In all those situations, like you were mentioning earlier, it's just we all talk about the success stories, but we don't talk about the times like, oh, it was God's plan, but Johnny died, and that was it. And we're not like, oh, wonderful for Johnny. No, we like henpeck out like these certain stories that we want to try to champion, and then we say, "Thus saith the Lord," for all time, for all people.
Yeah.
So I'm
guessing on an ad lib sentence at the end.
Yeah, I'm guessing if that person that was commenting thinks there's levels of things, I would say, yeah, there probably is. I mean, like for me to skin my knee and learn a lesson from it, that's one thing. But for someone to so viciously hurt somebody else, and me if I'm a loving God, if I see everything, if I know everything, if I'm according to the narrative, if I control everything, even there's nothing redeemable in a rape. There's never been a rape survivor ever that said, boy, I'm sure glad I went through that because I'm a better person now. Most of them just fight the rest of their life to become normal. And also they fight to, if they expose it, it ruins their life. Especially a mega pastor, maybe more than his life, to get this out there. And so it's not the same, and it's not everything. And you can't make global statements like that with that much passion about something that you're unsure of. Even you're not even sure that, I can tell. Not you, Stuart, but
I'm not sure of it either.
Well, that's a thing that I've also been really big on is even though like I teach history, I like quotes, but I'm very anti like axiom, like these maxim statements that are just like this is always true, or like having these slogans and stuff. I mean, of course I have them in my classes and stuff, but I always I really prickle at them because I think partially because I grew up in the church and there's all these, it's, God works in mysterious ways. It's always, you can just, because it's just throwaway lines, like Stuart, you were saying, it's just a way to like kind of sneak it in. Well, I guess it'll make it work. God will figure it out. God finds a way, whatever. But it's just a cop out answer. It's the easy answers that I am really not a fan of. Because if we want to do big things, we have to do complex work. I actually use another phrase from my father quite often, which is, if you want the things that other people don't have, you have to do the things that other people won't do. And that means hard work. And I think not just in religion, of course, I see it in a myriad of other things, but it's a big thing just throw a phrase away. So I don't actually have to do the physical or emotional work necessary to actually deal with this shit. Cause it's easy. Let's be honest, for a family of a rape victim, it's also hard. It's also really hard for them to do that. They may have done something that let it happen. They may have been friends because, most of these things happen within families and stuff like that. They may have not noticed signs that these things were going on. So they are also dealing with their own trauma. And so it's much easier just to kick the can down the road or ignore it or throw out a cheap 5-cent line instead of actually doing the hard work. And I understand why people do it, but it frustrates me. Sorry, there's honking going on.
Sometimes I wonder too, when we talk about pastors in this scenario, a lot of the ones I've known, I mean, Carl, anyone that back me on this, but a lot of pastors I've known do not like people. They're not really people. And like in these situations where we throw out like this nugget theology to make it sound good in a hard situation, what it also tells me is there's no, like, they're not in community with that person at all.
Yeah.
Like it wouldn't be like if your kid gets hurt or some tragedy happens to your kid to be like, God will be fine with it. All right, I did my job here. See you later. I've got somewhere else to go now, and then leave. And I think sometimes those answers are easy from a stage when we're not invested in people and we're back from it. But in reality, I mean, that would just, it would be just as cruel if I told this to someone I know one-on-one versus being just as cruel saying it on stage to somebody. And they're equally not helpful in doing that.
Yeah. When we talk to women, when we hear women's survival stories, the number one thing they say by far that they want men to do, and they're usually kind of halfway talking to pastors and narcissistic leaders and so on, and they say, what we want you to do, please, is listen to our stories.
Yeah.
And if those narcissistic pastors would listen to 4 or 5 of those stories, we'd probably have 100 survivor stories on our podcast. And then they might begin to get it. But like you say, most pastors that I've known that have a church that's over 100 people have other people hired to to have those kind of conversations. They don't have those conversations. They prepare, and I'm not saying they don't do anything. I'm saying they don't do what they don't want to do. And a lot of that is keeping themselves away from people, believe it or not. I mean, they may have started out with, man, I love to go help at the soup kitchen. I love to, get some shoes for people that don't have shoes. And I like to do those things. And, but what they end up doing, because of the pressures of the organization, you got to keep the organization running. You got to have the show every Sunday. You got to keep that stuff going. So you do kind of begin to just get angry at people. I've heard mega pastors talk behind the scenes and say, I really don't want to talk to people afterwards because they just tell me what was wrong with my sermon, or they ask a question I don't want to answer. And it's like, come on, that you're missing the point of the whole deal, right?
Well, what you just
That's
described almost is just a performance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, and there's, again, it's the us and them thing. And I think that makes cheap theology easy when we're just kind of, when we're so far removed from that.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. And it kills me too that none of that even speaks to evil in the world. You know, the idea that like, oh, it's just going to all be fine. It's going to come together and it'll be great in the end. And it doesn't speak to the larger narrative of who we are as humans. I mean, let's just, if we erase God from the scenario, just being a species that's trying to survive on this planet, we're going to naturally learn from things when we fall down. Like that's just part of the human experience, or we die. You know, those kind of things. So some of that is just, it's almost overly painfully obvious when they try to like put a God spin on it, that you're going to learn from this or you're going to grow from this. Well, yes, we're going to learn and grow from this. I mean, that's natural. That's part of what we do as people. And we don't have to we don't have to make this overly religious in a lot of times. So we're like, sometimes stuff sucks and people are bad and people do horrible things and there's no meaning to it. Besides, there's just a lot of evil and there's people that are messed up and not dealing with trauma, and they dump their trauma into art, into us. And then now we have trauma. And some of this has happened since the beginning of the world. And I think us just as humans being able to, it's beginning to like recognize that and then be able to be co-people with each other in this shit we call life, trying to survive here, as opposed to trying to like put higher meaning to this, to things, because sometimes just bad stuff happens.
Yeah, but it's devastating too. Yeah. It's devastating when you say, well, God has a plan for everything. God's going to rescue you. God wants a miraculous life for you. And when shit happens, then the pastor says, well, shit happens because God's in control and he allowed that to happen. So does a tremendous amount of damage when they repeat those little axioms that suit their purpose, gets them out of having to deal with the harder questions.
Or even
it leads to people, but it leads to people accepting it and not actually going on and doing the work to fix it. And it makes people who are survivors of whatever, physical violence, whatever it is, they just go on to accept it and go, well, this is what God wants, so I guess I'll just shut up and be quiet. And that makes it easier again for people in leadership, pastors, things like that.
To have control.
So they get what they want in the end.
Yeah.
And the insidious thing that they'll slide into is, I don't think we've totally tipped on this one, especially since we mentioned Southern Baptists earlier. When bad stuff happens, do you have sin in your life? Mm-hmm. Is there something that you did maybe in your heart to allow this to happen? Maybe it's you that did this, which is just...
that for sure happens in the Southern Baptist Convention. Victim shaming and all those things are very big.
Yeah. Well, that's, I don't even know what to say about it, but I mean, we just had the big Southern Baptist Convention recently, didn't we?
Yeah, I think they voted positively on one thing. We can talk about that later in the next segment, but it's... So we're ready to move on.
The Southern Baptist, we can just leave it with, they're very sex positive. I think for the victimizers, is kind of where they're at for,
that's about right.
As long as you're ordained and have an excuse and can say like, well, she was wearing a short skirt, so
what are you gonna do?
Southern pastors are a bunch of greasy, nasty bastards. That's at least what I've learned from being a part of them for a number of years.
Yeah,
there sure are a lot of youth pastors in churches like that end up marrying one of their former disciples. They wait until they're 18 because they're classy and of God. But
holy grooming before.
That's right.
I'm sorry, discipleship, not holy grooming, discipleship. That's the right word.
That's about right. It's but they made a real woman out of her.